is usually the next round? Like after, let's say, your CV gets shortlisted.
So if your CV gets shortlisted, then I think the most important thing becomes your communication skills, and your problem solving strategy, for problem solving approach. If you can be a great problem solver, but if you are not able to communicate your approach to the interviewer, it doesn't help. So you should build on your communication strategy. It's okay to fumble, but it's not okay to have a unsound logic.
So what's usually asked in these interviews?
So usually what we do is that we usually give a problem, oftentimes the problem that we are facing, uh, because it helps two cases. It gives you more understanding of the what kind of problems you will be working on when you join the company, and and it also helps us take in an interview, because if we are giving a problem that we are facing and you give me a solution, you might actually give me a very good solution that might solve my problem. So it usually helps, and I tend to give one of, unless it is data sensitive and competitor sensitive, I just give a problem that I'm working on. So I'll give an example. Uh, so one of the things that we did at Grab, and this is a problem that I worked on, is that if you know about those cycle sharing or e-scooter sharing services, so they usually, what happens is that you can pick them up from a definite point and you have to drop them off at a definite point, and then you get charged for the time you have consumed that service. There can be people, there are bad people always around. There can be people who just leave them somewhere in the middle of the road or just dump it somewhere. So in Singapore, that was a big problem. The government is very strict and when it comes to laws here, and they didn't want any stray scooters. That is a term that we used to call those scooters on the road at all. So the problem statement that we were given with was that we had to bring the stray scooter numbers from X percentage, which was when we launched the product. I cannot tell you the exact percentage, to less than 1% within like a month. So that was the problem statement. So we had a definite success criteria that, hey, it is at this number right now. We have to get that number down to 1%, so that government allows us to run. So that was a definite problem. And then we went ahead and tried to find out why people are actually leaving the scooters. So what we did was, uh, we just pulled the data of first 200 people who had just randomly left the scooter somewhere. We called each one of them. It's tiring, but we did call each one of them, each of the 200 people. So there were me, my designer, and the UX researcher. All three of us made like 66 calls each, and we talked to like 66 people, 66 people, 200 people, and we tried to came across why they actually leave the scooters where they are not at the designated places. So what we were able to do from that data was that we could identify some definite problems that was leading for people to actually leave their scooters in the middle of the road. And what we did was that we identified those problems and implemented those solutions and found solutions for those problems and implemented those solutions. So within like the first 3 weeks, we were able to get it down to roughly 3% of what it was initially, from what it was initially. And then, so what happens usually in product management is that we follow a 80-20 rule. So usually 80% of the problems are caused by 20% of the things. That's a thumb rule that you will usually notice in things. So the largest problems that you are solving are usually smaller problems, and but they'll solve the large amount of your problem. But if you have to really drill down from that 3% to 1%, you have to then be more reliant on data, talk again to people, try to find out more granular reasons, and then keep on solving them. So yes, so what essentially every problem, every product management journey starts with a problem, then you go and find out solutions, you implement the solution, then you measure success. So
So
that kind of happens everywhere.
when you ask this question to, let's say, in an interview, that this is a problem that we're facing, like how much time do people have to answer it, and like what are you looking for in the answer? Like, I don't think everyone would arrive at a solution that is like the best solution, but like what are you looking for in that interview, and how much time do you generally?
So time actually depends on the type of interview. Usually, for a 45-minute round, we try to keep it at 2 questions. So you have roughly 15 minutes per question. And what you should do is that you should work with the interviewer. Is that you should ask as many questions to clarify what you are building. So a you don't actually need to come up with an answer. You just need to give an approach to the interviewer, because the interviewer, if he's facing the problem, he's not looking for you to come up with an implementation of the problem. He can do that himself. What he's looking at is like how you approach the problems. If you come across an approach that the other guy hasn't thought about, that will definitely give you brownie points, but that is not expected. What you should always do is that you should try to get as much data as possible. You are allowed to make assumptions, but reasonable assumptions. If you're not comfortable making assumptions, you can ask the interviewer like, hey, what kind of like, you can definitely ask the interviewer, like in my case, if I gave this question to somebody, I would expect them to question like, hey, why do people actually leave the scooter? How many people actually leave the scooter? Is there any consequence of them leaving the scooter? So these are the questions that you should be able to ask as many questions. You should work with the interviewer to come up with a solution, and you definitely are not required to come up with the correct answer. You are just required to come up with a structured approach to the problem. That's all. That is.
So what would be like a good approach for this problem that you mentioned? Like,
so I'm a bit biased towards the solution because I already went through one round of it. But usually,
but like, what is a realistic? I mean, what is something that would impress you? Like, what's an approach that would impress you? A realistic one.
See, something that will impress me is that if a product manager is willing to go forward and talk to the end users as much as possible, because you have to get your hands dirty. There is no two ways about it. If somebody is ready to delve into the data, get their hands dirty with the data, try to get qualitative and quantitative feedback to approach a problem, that will impress me. Like if they say that I will go and talk to the people, I'll try to find people and ask them why are you doing this? Then I'll drill a bit more deeper regarding what kind of questions you'll ask them. But that will be the first point that will impress me, that this guy is ready to talk to them.
Right.
So
right.
So oftentimes you will find product managers who just expect solutions to come from their team, but as a product manager, you shouldn't be ideally doing that. A product manager should be the one ready to get their hands dirty with the data as much as possible.